Ladies and gentlemen, greetings from Los Angeles. My name is Zoran Pilot, and I would like to greet you like dear brothers and sisters, no matter where you're at, anywhere in the world. The Power of Diaspora is the, how should I say, unit of love. Unit of love, who we are, where we are, and where we're going. Today, I have a very interesting two guests that pretty much are example spreading that love, who we are, where we are, and what we want to do. And in Belgrade studio, very proud to have them together. It's lady, my sister Angelina Lazar, and my brother John Bosnitch, if you don't mind to call you with that, how should I say it, name. Greetings.
Hello.
Perfectly fine to hear that. That's good.
Okay, so here we are in the era, how should I say, Trump Nation. Today we are to promote initiative Serbs for Trump. It's kind of delicate time that we live in. And John, if you don't mind, if we would like to introduce Angelina, or maybe she can say something about us, because we should say ladies first. Then we're going to jump on your overwhelming, overview of what we were doing here.
Great. So to introduce myself, is it?
Yes.
Pomaže Bog, prvenstveno, draga braćo and sestre, dear brothers and sisters, Angelina, Serbskaya, as I say, as the Russians call me, Lazar, from Canada, as John is. But I'm a defender of human rights and peacemaker worldwide. I was advisor to the former director of Interpol, the Chinese director. I'm an international chaplain. I've been working on the Serbian national question for a good 3 decades. A couple of dear old friends of mine, both Mdusha Prosti, Professor Dr. Veselin Đuričić and Slobodan Jarčević. First time I've come to Belgrade and not seen them, really taught me a lot. And it was something I prayed over while I was in Monastery Žiča 8 years. And so I have been working on that and advising powers that be in the world. Mm-hmm.
There you go. So John, people know you. I would say that you are, is it bad word when you say influencer? When you say that pretty much there is a lot of people following you?
If I have some positive, if I have some positive effect, I'm very happy to be called an influencer. Yeah. If I'm influencing things in a negative way,
yeah. Kind of goes both ways. Both ways. No. Okay. You're very, how should I say, sturdy. You have strong words. You don't mind going in open and say what's on really your mind. So if you want to kind of maybe introduce, what you want to do tonight.
Well, normally I'm not speaking in English on Serbian topics. I'm speaking in my still far from perfect version of Serbian. But now you're going to hear me in English, because this is the language in which I typically worked as a political advisor and as an analyst of political questions. And the reason I'm here on the program today, not particularly talking about Serbian issues, but talking about global issues and about American issues, is because the world has more than ever before become a single village. And events that take place in one place greatly affect the events in another place far away on the earth. And today, the topic I'd like to talk about is the election in the United States. And I feel that I have a right to talk about the election in the United States, mm-hmm. because despite not being an American citizen, I've lived on the border of the United States for about half of my life, a few hours from the border in Canada. I continue to be a citizen of Canada, which is an ally of the United States in its global military security presence. I now live here, and I am a citizen of Serbia, which Serbia has become a member in the American global military presence. Despite the fact that we're officially neutral, we have a critical, most important part of our territory, which is now effectively under occupation, not just by American forces, but by Albanians who were allowed to take possession of the Serbian heartland of Kosovo as a result of decisions made by the United States deep state. I mention that term, the deep state, rather than the State Department or Congress or anybody in an official position, because in fact the decision to finance Albanian terrorists, to militarily train them, to arm them against a legal state, the country of, at that time, Yugoslavia, and to actually authorize them to conduct kidnappings and organ sales. All of that came from the so-called deep state that operates, especially now during the Trump era, almost without any control from the legal president of the United States. There is a state within a state in the United States. That so-called deep state is not elected by any American, but it has a great degree of influence over the lives of Americans, the lives of all the people who have had to interface with the tougher end of the stick, which means being an outlying territory in the American sphere of influence. And it also is a place that these outlying areas in the American, I call it the American Empire, I believe it to be an empire.
It is.
Something that George Washington warned Americans never to do, never to form an empire. So there is an American empire. We call it the American Empire, but it's not really the American Empire. It's the deep state empire. And the deep state is a parasitical group of unelected individuals who use their influence and their power and their money to piggyback on America and drive America in directions that are not at all consistent with the founding fathers' will, consistent with the warning of George Washington to the American people not to become an empire, nor consistent with the interests of the American people today. Because the idea that Americans had to go to places like Afghanistan to deal with a government in Afghanistan about events that took place far away from America, and to deal with the hunting down of so-called terrorists who themselves, not just 2 decades earlier, were visiting the White House when the mainstream media and the White House were actually controlled by the same people. This is a new dimension in the American experience. And it's this new dimension of outsiders, unelected outsiders, taking control of the US government that brought Trump to the fore. Trump is, as we all know, whether you like him or you dislike him, Trump is no normal president. He is not a person who was brought up inside a political party. In fact, Trump was previously a Democrat. And he gave donations to the Democratic Party in New York State. But Trump is outside this Democrat-Republican thing. Trump is an American first. Yes, he's a businessman. Yes, he's a conservative. Yes, he's had all kinds of scandals.
All about.
Everybody wants to spend time diverting attention from the real issues. But now people like myself, a Canadian who's also a Serbian citizen, have a real reason to speak to American Serbs. But we're speaking to you today in English because we hope that this message will go outside the American Serbian community, that hopefully some of the more active Serbs in America, who are well integrated in their community, who perhaps have more non-Serbian friends than they have Serbian friends. Like I did. I grew up in Eastern Canada. I had not one Serbian friend. My father, for a long time, was the only Serb in the entire province of New Brunswick. So all of my friends and all of the people I did politics with were non-Serbian. They had nothing to do with Serbia, and they probably didn't even know where Serbia was. There are many Serbs in America who are like that, who are well integrated in the surrounding community, who speak English 90% of their day, or maybe 100% of their day, or don't speak Serbian at all. I mean, I didn't speak any Serbian until I moved to Serbia. None. These people, these well-integrated Serbs in America, who are loyal, patriotic American citizens, who have an entourage of, let's say, 20 good American friends. These are the Serbs for whom tonight's broadcast is made. You have, and you are the only people who can do it, you have the duty now to share with your non-Serbian regular American friends of any ethnicity, of any color, of any political background, the reason why you support Trump, without making it dependent on Serbian issues, on Kosovo, and so on. In other words, to send the broader message that Trump represents. And the broader message that Trump represents is that it's time to stop the war machine that has been the main driver of the American economy since World War II. Mm-hmm. Because we've come to the point where there's nobody left to make war with. There are no more small countries to have wars with. The only wars that are possible now are the real one, the nuclear war with Russia or with China. And that game doesn't play anymore. It's no longer a matter of the deep state and the military industrial complex working together to make themselves rich and to dominate American politics and to make bogeymen out of this country or that and invade those countries and kill those people. Gaddafi, sending the American Air Force to bomb Libya over Gaddafi. These things are over now. They've eliminated, they've made money, and so on. But Trump suddenly appeared out of the blue and said, America used to be an economy that was not based on war. America used to make the best cars. America used to make the best hi-fi. America used to make the best of everything. And what happened was, to keep countries on its team, on its war team, providing products for the war machine, America farmed out all of the other production and turned itself into a military producer only. Meanwhile, Japan produced all the Walkmans and all the cars, and they're copied then by South Korea, basically an American protectorate, which now produces the Hyundai cars and other cars that Americans are driving. And what got left in the waste can was the American worker. And when the American worker didn't have money to survive, the quality of living in America fell below the sustainable level. And add to that the unresolved problems on many social levels inside America, this whole Black Lives Matter issue, which has been weaponized against Trump. It's been weaponized against Trump. And I have an interesting little personal story. I travel a lot. And almost all of my trips go through New York. I used to come from Tokyo to New York. I come from Moscow to New York. I come from London to New York, up in Canada to New York, because it was just the cheapest place to travel. Well, one time among those many, many visits, I mean, perhaps hundreds of visits, I sat next to a black man from America, and we started talking politics, as I always do with whoever I'm sitting next to. And lo and behold, he told me he worked in Trump Tower. And I thought, okay, this is an interesting little connection here. This is years ago. This is before Trump became the president. And I asked him what Trump was like. I had heard the stuff about Trump being a rich white guy who, like typical rich white guy in New York, is not going to be too open to having black guys on his staff. Unfortunately, I've been to New York enough times to see that with my own eyes. It's one thing to hear it on the mainstream lying media 1,000 times. It's another thing to see it yourself every time you go into a shop, go into a business meeting, or then you go and meet the lawyers, and all the lawyers are white. Or you go and meet all the company presidents, they're all white. So here I meet a guy, he's black and he works for Trump. And I asked him what it's like. He goes, Trump's the best employer I've ever had in my life. I said, I don't want to be, insensitive here, but I heard the story that Trump is typically the white racist American. He goes, not at all. Trump is the only employer I've ever had who remembers my birthday, my wife's birthday, and my kid's birthday, and sends flowers to my wife on our wedding anniversary. And my wife is black too, just to mention. Every year since I've been working for Donald J. Trump, my wife and I have received a bouquet of flowers on our wedding anniversary from Donald Trump. Okay, wonderful. That's the first time I met somebody who knew Donald Trump and who worked for him.
Wonderful.
Since then, I've met several people, and the same message has come from everyone. Okay, so that's my little personal window into who Donald Trump is.
Yeah, well, let's.
It may just be. It obviously it's not a representative sampling. It's just what I learned. Mm-hmm. And then when I started hearing Trump debate Hillary Clinton, and the way he debated her, and the way he held her accountable for the wars and the bombing and the denigration of the presidency by her husband, which she covered up for, then I realized that there's a difference between Trump and the system that goes beyond the warmonger machine and the business machine. It goes beyond the personalities. It represents a different America. And I've traveled a lot in America, and I know many Americans. I can tell you, after having worked 1 year in Washington, in D.C., dealing with intelligence matters, and at the same time, previous to that, working as a representative on Serbian issues in the Houses of Congress and meeting senators and members of Congress, of the House of Representatives, I can tell you Donald Trump is a complete, total outsider to that system. 100%. He's unbuyable. He has his own money. And he's unflaggable. You can't stop the man when he knows he's right. And in that sense, he's the only person who can end the war machine. There isn't another, let's let Trump lose this one. There'll be another guy who's going to be like Trump, who's going to run in the next election. No, there will not be. There isn't another guy like Trump. There isn't another option. This is it. Trump was ripped off of his entire first term by a lie concocted by Hillary Clinton, certainly Bill Clinton, Axelrod, the speechwriter for Obama, who basically operated Obama by remote control, by the people inside the White House who prefer to win their elections before the people vote, by denigrating the other candidate and undermining him, making it impossible to run, by secret recordings of Trump talking some locker room talk or whatever you want to call it, and suggesting that the presidency of the most powerful country on the world should be determined by what Trump said about women 20 years before he entered politics. That's the kind of tactics used by the other side. Now, a fair-minded person, whether they're a Democrat or a Republican or a Canadian or an African or an Asian, we all understand that that's not the reason that a man should be or a woman should be elected president of the United States. We have a lot in this. You know, I'm a war correspondent. I've been under US and Canadian and other NATO bombs multiple times. I missed being incinerated with 16 of my fellow staff members at Radio Television Serbia.
Yeah.
I missed the incineration by 45 minutes because, like usual, I was late.
Lucky you. Lucky you.
It's just, I missed it just by that, 45 minutes. But I knew the people who died. Mm-hmm. Among those who were killed, there was not one propagandist. There were a number of young women who were hairdressers with children. Their families lost their mother. There were a number of young men who were cameramen, set designers, microphone boom operators. There was not one political person there. There was not any member of the military there. There was no member of the police there. And they were bombed by Bill Clinton with the consent, of course, of Joseph Biden and at the urging of Hillary Clinton. Bill Clinton, Joe Biden, Hillary Clinton, Obama, this is one entity. The problem that you have in America and in Canada is that, you know, over here in Europe, you Serbs who are listening, you know this. For a familiar friend, you call him T, like you, bro, in English, let's say. Hey, bro, that's T. You know the guy, and you can call him just by his first name. But if you don't know the person, and it's the first time you meet them, it's like in French and in many languages in Europe especially, you have a different way to say you, and that's V. Or like in French, you'd say vous. Many Americans know French. So an unknown person, to show them respect, you call them vous. You don't call them toi, ti, as in Serbian or in French or in other languages. So when you don't have that formal way of saying you to somebody in English, you get the mistaken impression that everybody's your close buddy. Because you talk about Bill Clinton as Bill. And you call Hillary, you call her Hillary. I mean, she even runs for office. Hillary's running. It's not Hillary Clinton. Mm-hmm. It's Hillary. You call her by the first name. That'll never happen in Europe and won't happen in Asia either because nobody knows anybody's first name because they don't get that close to know who they are. But the reverse is true in America. You think you know Bill Clinton because you talk about him as Bill. You don't know Bill Clinton. You do not know Barack Obama. You do not know Hillary Clinton. You do not know Joseph Biden. You do not know any of them. Because when they discuss affairs of state, and I'm a former head of government advisor. I've advised in Asia, I've advised in North America, and I've advised in Europe. The discussions that take place in that room, those discussions you will never hear unless there's a leak. And even if there is a leak, the leak will not portray to you the way in which they talk about the people.
Okay, let's
condescending. Yeah, I gotta just put this in there.
Sure.
It's a condescending, we're gonna decide, they're gonna do. There's no consultation. Mm-hmm. You got the election, you won the election, now you're in power for 4 years, you do what you want. 6 months before the election, you go back into electioneering mode, you change your tone, you play down all the bad stuff that you did, you get another mandate, you do it again. Hillary Clinton and her team tried to steal, and did steal, 3/4 of Donald Trump's first term as president. Because he had to fight a rearguard action against the equivalent of a Benedict Arnold stabbing him in the back for 3 full years of his presidency, accusing him of working for Russia, which we all know, even his detractors agree it's not true. It's all been misproven, all been disproven, and nobody took responsibility for it. Hillary doesn't take responsibility for it. Joe Biden says it wasn't me, it was them. Barack doesn't say anything, but they're all one entity. There's the mistake. Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, Joseph Biden, Bill Clinton. This is one entity. It's not a group of individuals. These people serve a purpose. They do as they're told. They all benefit together collectively if they do what they're told. They get financing, they get donations, they get hundreds of millions of dollars donated to their Clinton Foundation. And they live on the cream of the donations of people who were lied to for the rest of their lives. The reason I'm particularly upset about this is because I worked in Washington and I had members of Congress speak to me, and the first word they asked is, how much money are you giving me? How much money are you going to donate to my campaign? Not what your issue is. They right away said, your issue is right. We know it's legal. This is it. But how much money do you have? And when can you get it here? Donald Trump didn't need to do that ever. And that's what makes him different. Donald Trump has his own money. Donald Trump risks his entire private business. I'm sorry to monologue here, but this has to be established from the start. Donald Trump stopped making money on his private business to come and try to make America different from what Clinton, Obama, Hillary, and the whole deep state had turned the country into. That's what we're talking about. Nothing else. Not his hairdo, not the past, nothing. You can talk about the past as much as you want, but you can never change the past. So if you have any energy left after whining about the past, that 100% of that energy has to be spent changing the future. Right now we can do that. That's the message to Americans, not Serbs. I mean, I can whine, I got bombed, so what? What does that have to do with Illinois or Kansas? Nothing. But you paid for the bombs instead of paying for new schools. You paid for the cruise missiles, which did not hit me. You paid the hundreds of thousands of dollars for them, and that's why your streets are falling apart, why your infrastructure is falling apart. And that's what only a businessman could figure out. Because Donald Trump works and makes money from work. Not like Bill Clinton, not like Hillary Clinton, not like Barack Obama, not like any of those guys whose only work is getting in government and getting kickbacks for being there. Okay, that's my intro to the subject.
That was John Bosnitch at the best. One day, John, you're gonna end up like me in White House. But I would use you as a campaign. I would use you as a campaign, and really kind of push me, over there. Angelina, our sister Angelina, we would like to hear from you, basically your mission right now. You are on your way to America, and if you can tell us, pretty much about that part, because I think John very nicely, summarized, how should I say, point in which later on we're going to try to debate, and I'm going to act as opposition and, kind of question certain things just to have kind of spice to this, call it debate, not really debate, but
Sure.
our effort. Yeah, go ahead.
I did want to springboard off of that. What John says is very, very true, that the deep state is a huge problem, and it doesn't only operate America-wide, it is truly worldwide. And I discovered truly that entity that is the state within a state is indeed the Department of Homeland Security. The U.S. never had a Department of Homeland Security before. It was never needed. This is where all of that action occurs. Also included in the deep state is the military-industrial complex, the dark side of the FBI and CIA, etc. And this is very well coordinated. Also, it's certainly part of the justice system as well. President Trump invited me, the only Serbian woman, to his inauguration as a VIP guest. When I made it to the border, I am from Windsor. That's like a mile and a half from Detroit, right across from the Detroit River. When I made it to the border, I was illegally arrested by 5, not 1, but 5 members of CBP, Customs Border Patrol, which is one of 15 agencies underneath the Department of Homeland Security, who have been trying to throw trumped up charges at me for quite some time. I've been warring it against the deep state for approximately 3 decades now. So they very much know who I am and very much know that I live my life righteously, and they are extremely unrighteous. I'm talking about the dark side, indeed. Certainly there are always righteous people in any which agency, but the core of Department of Homeland Security, DHS, is definitely deep state for sure. So I have my extreme personal experience with that as well. President Donald Trump, I agree. Certainly, and I spoke about that today as well on Metanoia, is not a perfect person. No one is perfect. We all sin. But President Trump doesn't have the luxury of going to our churches and monasteries like we do to pray, etc. He is spending day and night and day, fighting for all Americans, American Serbs, even peoples of the world, as leader of the free world, as they say. So no one should expect him to be perfect. He's got so much weight upon his shoulders. He's got so much stress. This man is really, truly a hero, and we really need to be praying for him, and that in our typical Orthodox fashion, very, very much so. So we will be going to America to definitely root for Trump, and we'll be going from state to state to state, letting Americans know the truth about things that we know very well about Joseph Biden, the very corrupt Joseph Biden. And I can't even believe, to tell you the truth, that the Democrats couldn't come up with a better candidate than that, who's basically totally dementia, who can't even finish a sentence, who is so corrupt, so pernicious, so nefarious, and so sinister and full of vice that it literally shocks me. I really am shocked to see how programmed the Democrats are, that they could even fall for such a far below par candidate. So we will certainly be doing our part, because we have our experience with who Biden is, who is a part of the deep state. And he is definitely, I will say, not just a Serbophobe, but out of all, not just American politicians, but all politicians in the world, number one enemy of Serbs.
Yeah, this is the first time that really Serbs as a community acted and reacted. So it's really kind of good to know that there is some type of trigger, that pretty much putting people. But we have to take in consideration that many people have different views and different orientation. So if we would go by those, call it colors, or call it, way of looking into it, we are again all Serbs, and let's call it that there is a democratic oriented Serbs, that there is a liberal Serbs, there is a different, how should I say, entities that pretty much made up their mind, and we are not here to kind of convince them, but I think it would be very nice to, in certain sense, smooth out, recognize the differences, acknowledgement, and the most important reason why not to vote, at least, if that's the hardest thing to do, and swallow, let's call it, some Trump that for any given reason they like or don't dislike. I would say so. I was receiving, let me just kind of give you a little bit more material so you can kind of wrap it up, in prompt response. Pretty much that would be as well, for John, because I've been receiving newsletters, Serbs for Trump, and it's pretty much really nicely colored Republican, and you're a Republican. And the thing is, at certain point, they're really a little bit overstepping and accusing and attacking opposite sides in sense it's your fault, you're guilty one way or the other. And I know personal people, who were absolutely offensive, but they type of letters because it's really their, how should I say, right to call it lean left or right or doesn't matter. But then again, getting, kind of division in big country that has good institution of voting and expressing freedom and everything else, it's putting us on wrong path in which we're supposed to kind of in all this divided world, all those divisions that we have. That's the purposely I'm kind of wearing this shirt in which we are kind of ripping these Levi's jeans, just on the seam, when we really, as a Serb, have to kind of use this opportunity to generate certain volume and quality and love for our sake and our recognition of certain future potential.
Well, actually, Zorane, I want to say that even if some of our Serbs have traditionally been Democrats and voted Democrat, I would say in this instance, point blank, there is literally no excuse or reason to vote Democrat this time around. I see the division not so much between Republicans and Democrats right now as between good and evil, Christians and, I have to say, Satanists. The Democratic party is a huge problem today. A lot of them are socialists. They have fascists among them, a lot of Satanists. Listen, I don't want to go into, I'm an economist myself, and I'm definitely not at all Democrat, as you say, but I'm not focusing on that. I'm focusing on who is Biden and who is Trump. And there is no excuse for any single solitary Serbian, American Serb to vote for a Democratic Biden. Sorry. Back to you, John.
No, that's fine. I like to hear that. John, what are you saying about my remarks in sense of this opportunity and unity that we kind of act together and see what we can do about it?
I would say basically the issue is I mean, I do this for a living, right? I've been a political advisor and I've been a commentator, and I've been doing this a long time. So some things that perhaps to me seem very clear may not seem that clear to somebody who doesn't do this very often. But what I've seen in this campaign is an all-out effort by the, let's say, the fanatical holdouts for the so-called New World Order group, which was the Bushes and the Clintons, who formed a single party together. Not in name, they still have Democrats and Republicans, but they basically wanted to have a Tweedledee, Tweedledum system. That's what we learn about in North America as children. Two things that are the same, and just switch them back and forth. And the public is actually the puppet in that system. The public goes out and votes. They think they're getting something different, but it's just bait and switch.
Yeah,
it's a candidate that's presented to you as being somebody you should vote for a certain other reason than the real reason that he's being put forward by the people who backed him. And luckily for us, And people, some people say this is the worst time ever to be on Earth, and it's like big crisis. Oh, there could be World War, blah blah blah. Look, I consider ourselves, all of us, no matter which position we're on this subject, to be incredibly lucky to be people participating in the decision in one way or another. I can't even vote in America. Mm-hmm. I have some, as you said, some influence on Serbs in America. Perhaps it's minimal, but I can't even vote there. But I do feel that I have a personal obligation to try to say some of the things that I can see about who Biden is and what he represents, only because I've been on the front line of several wars. I have a human network of lifelong trusted friends in target countries like China, Iran, Nigeria, Venezuela. I don't know whether it's just fate or good fortune, but I have personal lifetime friends who I went to school with in Canada who live in Venezuela, Iran, Ukraine, China, Syria, and Nigeria. And I have more newer friends who I've met in the past few years from Libya, from Morocco, from the countries that are in the crosshairs, the countries that have been bombed. Yeah. And so, without talking to them on a political basis, just talking to them as friends and ask them what's going on over there, I find a completely different picture than what I see on CNN or any of the lying mainstream media. And the only person in America who said it wasn't true and said they're lying is Trump. I mean, normally you could hear some other commentator or somebody, but no. The only person who got on mainstream television with a message disproving all of this happened to be the President of the United States of America.
And that's called image perception, image management.
And not only was he the President of America, elected, duly, legally elected, it was the most interesting thing to watch Trump over these past 4 years. Watching a man who you know is surrounded by traitors and cutthroats, and watching him survive. Mm-hmm. It's been astounding. His impeachment, the false stories about sexual shenanigans in a hotel room in God knows where, the attack on his character, the attack on Melania, the attacks on his children, anything they could throw at him, they threw it. And he's still standing. This is astounding. I didn't think that there would be a politician in America who could survive this. And let alone not a man who studied politics and was trained as a politician and worked his way up from the ward level and then mayor and then, let's say, state level politics and then federal congressman, House of Representatives, and you do a couple of terms in the House of Representatives. Then you're a senior and you can run for senator, and then you get on the most powerful committees on the Senate, and then you run for president. Okay, that's a 20 to 25 year process. Trump comes from nowhere, runs against, 12 or 13 Republican lifetime politicians, trounces them, then fights Hillary and understands politics better than she did, if you watch the debates. then wins the election, has the election stolen from him by the Russia collusion lie, and comes into another election against another close member of the tight-knit cabal, which was running the whole show. And none of the people on the Democratic Party side or on the side of Biden want to discuss the fact that that's where Biden comes from. That's the group that he represents. Mm-hmm. So we're living in an alternate reality. And unfortunately, the American television watching public has a very short memory, and they can be told whatever they want, whatever the lying mainstream media wants to tell them. And that'll be today's reality for many, many people. And,
mass programming.
Unfortunately, there are some flaws in democracy. One of those flaws is that Einstein gets one vote. And an idiot who can't even total up his monthly rent bill gets one vote. And his vote would negate Einstein's vote. The problem is there aren't that many Einsteins, and there are a lot of the other.
Yeah, America's.
And that's why you're in a strange situation having a Canadian of Serbian ethnic origin and another Canadian of Serbian ethnic origin.
Let me ask you, what's your leaning?
John,
what's your leaning, pretty much? You're kind of Republican type of guy, taking it all the...
I've never placed myself in the American context. The reason I've been primarily opposed to the Democratic Party is because most of the trouble that I've had while I've been living either in Japan or in Europe has been the result of the Democratic Party and their reliance on war as their main mechanism.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I also was not too keen on George W. Bush or George W.H. Bush. These men were the same. They were a part of the military-industrial complex. By the way, not having an empire, that was the advice of George Washington, the first U.S. president. And the term that all the opponents of Biden use, military-industrial complex, it's not some hippie term from the 1960s. It's not a bunch of long-haired leftists saying the military-industrial complex are a bunch of bad... No. It was General and President Dwight Eisenhower who coined the expression military-industrial complex. So if George Washington's warning 200 plus years ago about not forming an empire, because an empire would use the American people as cannon fodder and send them off to wars all around the world, which is what happened. Young American boys were sent off to die in Vietnam. Vietnam, the country that America does a lot of business with today. Business. Yeah. Trump, business. Okay. These disconnects have to be analyzed, and it's hard for Americans to analyze them because they're living inside that fishbowl all their life. I'm not. I lived up in Canada. We didn't draft people to go and fight in Vietnam. We did not install a military draft that took people off the streets and locked them up if they didn't go and fight in Vietnam. We didn't do that. So I looked through the fishbowl from my childhood. I'm, like most of us who live in the periphery of the American empire, we're partially formed by that empire. All the kids of my generation, I'm 59 now, so I grew up in the 60s and 70s. All the kids of my generation watched Star Trek. Yeah. Captain Kirk. And Mr. Spock, super smart guy who gave him good advice and kept him on the level and kept Kirk from getting out of control sometimes. And what were they flying? They were flying the Starship Enterprise. Like the Starship Business. That's our starship. And we go around the universe trying not to kill anybody and trying not to make a war. And the bad guys make the wars. We don't make the wars. Right? Well, I actually believed the propaganda for a long time. It was great. Star Trek was super propaganda for America.
Yeah.
We just do business. We don't kill anybody. They always attack us. We put the phasers on low to just stop them, and we put the shields on high. Like, can I hold her anymore, Captain? The shields are going to burst. And Captain doesn't want to shoot the bad guys because they may not be bad. They may make a mistake. That was whitewashing what was actually happening in the 1960s. Now, in the 1960s, American B-52 bombers were carpet bombing Vietnam. They didn't put their shields on high. The guys on the ground in Vietnam couldn't shoot at the planes at all. They didn't shoot at them. Okay, so I was brought up in the picture that America wanted to make of itself. By not living in America, but living in Canada, I probably believed the American image of itself more than Americans did. Because they live in America and they can see, well, this is not exactly what I saw on TV tonight. But I lived over in Canada. We said, wow, geez, look at that. The Starship Enterprise going around. Everybody's going to have food and it's going to be great. So most Canadians were somewhat pro-American because the alternative was the evil Soviets. And the evil Chinese, even more evil. Well, okay, after you get out of the village and you get on a boat or an airplane, and you get somewhere and you meet those guys over in those other countries, and they're just as normal as you are, and they just don't want to have war just as much as you don't want to have war. Then you realize that the whole programming was not the reality. And then you open your mind to, well, if that's not the reality, what is the reality? And then you're given the choice between Bush and Clinton. And that's not a political system. Two-party system is not a political system. That's England.
Yeah.
That's America. Canada now has 4 or 5 parties. And God willing, we'll have more. Mm-hmm. So that you form a government and it has to have a variety of views. The only person in American politics today who has a variety of views, despite being stuck in the straitjacket of a two-party system, is Donald J. Trump. He has a variety of views that people say, oh, he's the crazy uncle, because he says stuff that's totally not within the dogma that people have been being trained to repeat for generations. Trump is open to different ideas. And if you can make a case to Trump, you can avoid a war and you can make both sides happy. And if this COVID issue hadn't come up.
It would be a different story. Totally different story.
Not a different story. It wouldn't be, you couldn't call it a story compared to what we're happening today. It was another dimension. It's not a story. It'd be a different reality, a different universe. So, and I'm paid to ask these questions, normally very, very well. Is it possible that COVID was sprung on America by Trump's opponents? My answer has to be yes. Why do I say yes? Because nobody can prove it's impossible.
Yeah, because they're using it anyway. Somehow they're using it.
Well, I mean, you use the old European first analysis is who benefits.
Yeah.
Did Trump benefit from COVID? Absolutely not. Did Biden benefit from COVID? Is COVID not perhaps the main issue of the Democratic Party campaign? Okay, good. So the main reason why the Democrats stand a chance in this election is because of COVID. Because until COVID, Trump was a shoo-in for re-election. The economy was booming. Everybody was getting jobs. There was no war with North Korea. Everybody's lovey-dovey. Korean leaders hugging Trump. Okay. The war that looked like it was going to happen in Venezuela was finished, and Trump then terminated his security advisor, who was all gung-ho for war. The war that everybody was afraid of in Ukraine that was started by the Democratic Party, not by Trump. It's cold. There's nothing going on there. The war in Syria that was started by the Democratic Party, it's over. the ISIS organization that grew out of Al-Qaeda, that grew out of the Zbigniew era in Democratic Party foreign policy, that's all over. So we had a situation where Trump was a shoo-in for re-election. What was the potential loss to the other side? Well, the military budget per year is X number of hundreds of billions. The spin-off kickbacks, the bribes, the localization of the business of the building of the rockets and the missiles, we're talking trillions. Okay, so if you're in a game for trillions, say I was in a game for trillions, and I have a budget of, let's say, 5 billion, because that's how much the budget was just for Ukraine, to destabilize Ukraine. 5 billion. To have the whole issue of Ukraine go into NATO and create a war in Europe and so on. That was a budget 5 billion. One little issue. Little Ukraine, take Donbass and have a war there. 5 billion. Give me 5 billion. I know a lot of smart guys and girls who I met in my work. If I gave them 5 billion and asked them to go out and find out what I need to know, I'd have it in a month. I'd know who did what, where they did it, when they did it, why they did it. I would know who generated what, how did it get where, when did it happen, and why was it? And the first question I'd be asking is there any noise in any intelligence circles that suggests that COVID was planted in China to come back to America by the domestic opponents of this president? Since we know they already lied in every way that they could to bring him down on his first term as president. Is it possible? It's not, and once again, I have to remind people who work as political advisors and consultants never ask, is it likely? Because nothing that the other side ever does is ever presented in such a way as it's likely that they did it, because then they would be discovered right away and we'd know who did what. So everything that comes at you is unlikely to come from its real source, as far as average person knows. So it's the reverse of, oh yeah, here, let's hear the usual suspects. No, it's the other. It's the other way. Political analysis based on, okay, let's look up the most unlikely suspects. They probably did it. And they have to work backwards. So that's my own personal, if you want to hear John's conspiracy theory, I think that there is a measurable possibility that COVID was either originated or hijacked by the anti-Trump faction as a means to remove Trump. So the worst thing they could do is, if they're absolutely evil, is to create it and do it. But the next worst thing they could do is take advantage of the situation, use it to undermine the man's presidency based on something that he couldn't control.
And then blame him off.
And blame him for it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a super version of bait and switch, and that threatens American democracy.
Okay, let me ask
American
Angelina.
democracy. Yeah.
Go ahead, finish if you want to, but I have a question for Angelina.
Well, I think that the main thing we're talking about here is, as much as I hate to admit it, because I'm not an American, don't live in America. In Canada, I did not like America telling Canada what to do. And here in Serbia, I certainly don't like America telling Serbia what to do. But I will admit that what happens in American democracy affects us all.
Yeah.
And it affects us even more than what happens in our democracies in Canada and Serbia.
Yeah.
So it's not possible anymore for somebody in America to say, "Okay, you shut up, bro. You're Canadian. You don't have a horse in this race." No, I'm sorry, bro. I got bombed. I was here being bombed. Okay. I've been on the receiving end of minor little issues in Canada, and I've been on the receiving end in Japan of what they call in Japanese gaiats. Gai, outside, ats, pressure. And that gaiats was coming from the military industrial complex of America, which was telling them what to do and how much charge and what to produce, not as an option, but as an order. And Trump is a different kind of person. He makes options, he makes deals, he makes an offer, and guess what? The man knows how to offer fair offers because people accept them.
Okay, Angelina, taking in consideration all John nicely said, I just want to see pretty much, how should I say, we have a situation that looks not so good, having, deep state going against Donald Trump and taking in consideration that he kind of pissed, many countries, because dislocating all these things, what's happening in the international relationship. Do you think pretty much that he still have a chance, taking consideration this, really kind of hard blow with the economy caused by COVID and everything else, do you think, that he is by himself against everybody? How would you kind of talk about it?
I think Donald Trump has an excellent chance. Actually, I don't believe in the statistics that the Dems put out. And by the way, I do want to qualify myself by saying that I did live in the States for a number of years and was moving in political circles and was a member of the American Association of Political Consultants and studied political management at the Leadership Institute and was in the Capitol Hill Club, etc. So I'm very well versed in American politics and studied, as well as John, political science, international relations. So I have been researching backstage politics for for a good 3 decades and have traveled the world myself and have a prophetic gift as well. So everything all lines up perfectly well as with my own research as well and personal experience. Trump has an excellent chance. And what John was saying about President Trump, yes, he's politically incorrect. And Americans absolutely love that, to be spontaneous, to speak the God honest truth, because you could never get that from any politician out of Washington, D.C. whatsoever. So this is a real plus. In fact, Trump's tweets have become extremely popular. That is his own direct personal relationship with the American citizens, which is excellent. So no one can skew that. And so this is really, people are becoming much more savvier now because they're not getting the real truth from CNN, NBC, ABC, etc., but from Donald Trump's tweets, from his press conferences, from him speaking the God honest truth to his own American citizens. People are becoming more enlightened. So I believe Donald Trump has an excellent chance. People see him fighting the deep state. People see him standing, as John says. These hits were incessant, day and night, incessant, basically his entire first term. And I think that he's really shown, we really show who we are when we go through such trials and tribulations. That's where we really shine. And that is where Donald Trump shone. And everybody has to respect him for that greatly, greatly. So I believe he's got a chance. I believe he will win. We are going to do everything in our power to ensure that he does win by speaking the God honest truth. And I want us to turn the conversation more to the deep state and Biden versus Trump, because I believe that the Serbian people can really enlighten the Americans on who Biden is. I can't believe that they don't know it and they don't see it themselves, but here we are to enlighten them to learn a little bit better about who and what Biden is.
2 things that could happen, pretty much, that either Trump gonna win or Biden will win. And we had a previously situation in which President Vučić kind of really blow it, with putting money on, call it, this type of joke, when they were presenting, what's going on, the choice between, call it, 2 clowns. And the situation is, that, again, we have some tendency that Trump is improving our situation in Kosovo. We have heavy, how should I say, campaign from Albanians south of the border and everybody else towards Biden. That's so obvious, that we see who is aiming, who is ruling, and everything else. But my problem is, pretty much for past 36 years living in the United States, that I never saw fulfillment of promises and good dealing, except when the lobby, the way kind of politics works, as John was describing, were bringing money to some senators or some, call it elected officials, who's supposed to represent American interests, suddenly start dealing with foreign interests just because they're being paid. We can't see any, how should I say, relationship between Biden and that specific region, except that he was very well paid and very well acted to portray really ugly picture of one nation that pretty much was sovereign and defending and, doing their own business until we got that criminal act by the United States and everybody else.
Okay, now you have opened up a can of worms here. And I want to say that not only has Biden been paid well, but Biden pays well. So I want to mention this, and this is an exclusive, and I have not made this known before, but I will tell you all this. We arrested Ramush Haradinaj January 2017, Interpol in France. We had full evidence on him, and we're about to extradite him to Serbia, to the courts for prosecution. And I will tell you all this, that at that time, then President Tomislav Nikolic was in Rio de Janeiro for the Olympics. He was there 2 days. The very next day, Biden was in Nikolic's office in Belgrade. He had him make an emergency trip back, and I can tell you that Biden was there to pay a very handsome 7-figure bribe for that evidence we had on Haradinaj, who is a serial criminal and terrorist who should be behind bars, if not executed, who is now ruling the bogus regime, Država of Kosovo, which does not exist. And Biden, how much he is a Serbophobe, how much he has spoken against us, spewed lies against us. He had only one thing to say, and that is he prides himself on his last visit to Belgrade having good relations with the government of Serbia. Those are not good relations, those are corrupt relations. He paid Nikolic a bribe. That is who and what Biden is.
Aye, the way American would say. Agreed, Oli. Again, I would like to hear really John, in call it, that type perspective, what can we really expect? Either it's going to be November or if they're going to postpone with the overlook on both options, what could happen after the elections are done, either way. And does he expect, because a lot of people talking about it's going to be very nasty, it's going to be really, they're calling, for that division, so we already see all those unrests, pretty much, what's the name, on the streets, and we really do expect even more to see after the election.
As for my prediction, I would say that I'm pretty confident that Trump will win. I'm not sure by what margin, because I think the voting American public hasn't yet made up its mind. In some senses, there's a hardcore support block for Trump, and there's a hardcore block of support for Biden, but it's that always undecided until the last day group that swings these elections. Once again, in a two-party system, the elections are always within a few percentage in a normal case, in a normal result. I think that Trump will win. I think that if he doesn't win, there's a good possibility that the election has been stolen. I do not see any possibility of Biden winning a big victory if he were to win. I see no possibility of that. I think Biden could just perhaps squeak in. And I think that what we're looking at here is, first of all, Biden is not the leader of his own group.
Mm-hmm.
Biden is just the puppet of the military-industrial complex and of the Democratic National Committee and of these institutions that have been running the United States through the president that they put in office. So Biden as an individual is not his own man. And I've heard those similar words from people who worked on his campaign and left, and from people who are journalists and who follow the way he answers questions and so on. That's Biden as an individual. I've personally dealt with Biden. Biden came to a press conference in Washington while I was working there, and I put him I think a relatively direct question about Kosovo, and he had no clue of how to answer it. He mumbled and stumbled for a few minutes. Then his assistant came up to him and whispered a few words in his ear. Now, of course, I use a telescopic mic, so I heard those words, and then I heard him repeat them. So I think Biden is a packaged candidate who's been told what to do and how to do it. Trump is not at all that. You can't describe Trump that way. So Trump is his own man, so the system is afraid of him because the system usually keeps the candidates under control. So Trump is like a loose cannon in Washington. There are a lot of vested interests in Washington, and those vested interests are the majority of the interests in Washington. They've been there for 200 years. They have a way of doing business. They have a way of making money, and that's what they do. Trump, amazingly enough, managed to beat the Republican infrastructure and the Democratic Party infrastructure 4 years ago. Can he do it again? Yes, he can. Once you've done it once, you can do it again. You know where the weak points are. You also know that it's not a question of having the numbers of workers on your campaign. It's just a question of having the really, really smart people who can find the hole. I would, I don't know where this video will go and what effect it might have, but I would suggest that for Trump to win an easy victory, which is still possible because elections can turn in a day. For Trump to win an easy victory, he has to use some evidence of Biden's collusion in an illegal act. I think that evidence exists. I don't know if Trump is in possession of it. The reason I say this is because Richard Nixon, when he lost to JFK, Richard Nixon was such a patriot that he decided to accept the loss, even though he had proven evidence that JFK had won the election as a result of polls stolen in Chicago. And Nixon wrote it in his memoirs. He said, I knew the election had been stolen from me, but as a patriotic American at the height of the Cold War, I felt it was better for me to lose the election than to have America lose its place in the world by being just like any other banana republic where elections are stolen in back rooms in some major city. It could be Nixon's dedication to America that allowed him to come back and win in '68, to win the presidency. But there are lots of people in America, who know that Biden is a bad guy. Lots of people who know that.
Nefarious.
Yeah.
There are lots of Democrats. There are lots of Democrats who know that. There are I have Democratic and Republican friends in America. There are lots of Democrats who know that. But the majority of them are being sold on this standard old Democratic story that, well, we're going to do better. We're going to give people more, a better quality of life. And Trump's an oligarch multimillionaire, and he doesn't care about the average man in the street. And, Biden's going to have free health care for all, or a better health care plan, and more social this and more social that. Never works out that way. It's always the same old story. People always go to the polls to say, oh yeah, I'm voting Democrat because they're going to keep the health care going, blah, blah, blah. And it just doesn't work out that way. So you had one unpolished, rude, in-your-face candidate who said, I'm going to stop outsourcing all the work in this country to other countries around the world where they can get the same work done cheaper at the expense of the American people. And he was confronted on this too. Trump's been confronted on this. Trump's had people come up to him, and I've seen this, come up to him and say, hey, but this is your product here. This is a Trump this and that. And it says made in Bangladesh. And Trump will look at it. Most other people would just refuse to even, they just walk away. No, Trump will look at it, look at the name, and he goes, well, what do you know? And then he'll give somebody a call, and that'll stop. Because Trump is willing to be proven wrong and to fix it. Whereas Biden and the ruling clique in the Democratic Party want to tell the public that they hold the moral high ground. They continue to try to hold the moral high ground after Clinton and his sexcapades with his secretary in the White House. His assistant.
Cost us a lot.
Yeah, it cost 16 of my colleagues their lives at RTS.
They're sexual perverts.
Hillary made up with her husband. It's all politics. Our marriage is politics. I'm going to stick with you because you're going to back me for president next time. If you don't, I'm divorcing you right today. Oh, I'll back you. I'll back you.
It's not a real marriage with them.
Well, I mean, I'm not in their marriage, but I can tell you that something's wrong there. But not to waste too much time being distracted by marriages and so on, because Trump's had 3. It's not the issue here. The issue is that Trump represents something totally different. You're not going to get another chance at somebody like this. He's not perfect. He's far from perfect. But he's perfectly good enough to be the president who can bring back work to America. And he's perfectly good enough to be the president that stops the extraterritorial wars of America on unknown enemies. And he's a perfectly good president who might even be able to find a solution to the trade imbalance with China. Because I can guarantee you, Biden won't.
And the alternative is a total joke with Biden. I honestly cannot believe we're even talking about.
That's the system. The party pushed him up. Do you remember when Bob Dole was the Republican candidate?
Yes.
Bob Dole's chances of winning were 0. Nothing. But he worked his way up licking postage stamps, and he worked his way up the party. And guess what? Bob Dole and Joe Biden share one thing. They were both heavily financed and deeply involved in the ethnic Albanian drug
Yes. Yes.
mafia.
Yes.
Bob Dole personally had a personal link to an Albanian doctor who by chance fixed his disability with his arm so that he could at least function. That's perfectly fine. But through that doctor, Bob Dole was introduced to the drug trafficking, woman slaving,
God forbid, yes.
organ
Yes, God forbid.
extracting, mass murdering
Of Serbs.
Albanian terrorist world, which was trained by the dark side of the CIA. That's where Bob Dole was connected, and that's where Biden was connected. And so when you've got a president of the United States who's worked with people who the CIA themselves and the State Department themselves called terrorists, okay, you don't see that in the words anymore. But before they put the so-called KLA, Kosovo Liberation Army, into power in Kosovo, they first went in there, destroyed a pacifist movement led by Ibrahim Rugova, who was a pacifist, anti-war, peaceful protester against Serbian possession of Kosovo. They sidelined him. He mysteriously died of cancer very quickly, like the previous leader of Venezuela. Well, like a lot of people who are opposed to America die of cancer surprisingly quickly. It's possible that some of that search for the cure also found some other
Opposite,
along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, you never know what you turn up when you're doing a $1 trillion research.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bob Dole was deep in that lobby, and Joseph Biden was deep in that lobby, and John McCain was deep in that lobby. John McCain, Biden, Bob Dole, these are the warmongers from the two-party system.
My point exactly. Biden supports the Albanian jihadis, the Kosovar serial criminals, narco mob bosses, traffickers of this,
They
that, and
finance
the
his
other.
campaign. What do you expect?
No Serb should vote for Biden.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
but we got to once again, we got to take this broader.
Mm-hmm.
If this broadcast is just a bunch of Serbs whining like usual, it's going to have no effect. Here's what we have to say. Number one, this is the limited message to the Serbian Americans who we know or don't know who happen to watch this. You have a personal responsibility to use the personal knowledge that you have as a Serbian American
That we're bringing in.
about Biden's involvement in the unnecessary illegal war on Serbia. Unprovoked, unlawful, illegal war against the United Nations, against the Security Council, the unilateral invasion, occupation, and turning over of the heartland of Serbia to U.S. declared terrorists. That sits in the responsibility drawer of Joseph Biden. Okay, as a Serbian American, you have to tell that to non-Serbian Americans. If you do that, there's 1.5 million Americans who are of Serbian descent. If 500,000 of you phoned 5 people each who are not Serbian, who are your most trusted, closest American friends, and said to them, without talking about Kosovo, except to say that Biden is connected to drug mafia, terrorists, women's slavery, and organ extraction,
And
vivisection
pedophilia.
of living people. Doesn't have to be Serbs. cutting living human beings, children, men and women apart alive, extracting their organs while they're still pumping, leaving them to die on the table in a farmhouse in Albania, and then medevacing those organs out to Turkey to be placed into the bodies of multimillionaires from around the world. If you tell that, and you know that Biden knew about that, and that Biden's regime was involved in that, that should get them to say, that's something I didn't know. And then you can talk about the strictly American issues. Biden's in Washington 47 years.
And what did he do?
47 years. A lot of the young Democrats who are being brainwashed by the lying mainstream media to vote for Biden aren't even half his age. They could have lived their entire life twice in the time that Biden has been walking up and down the hallways in the Capitol building, working for paying clients, taking money for whatever it was that paid his way. Trump never did that.
And he's
Trump has never had the story of being the man who you can rent out the bedroom in the White House for $100,000 donation or $50,000 or $1 million donation. That's not Trump.
Mm-hmm.
Trump actually owns a hotel. If you need to stay near where Trump is, you go to a hotel. You maybe get a hotel room from Trump. But you do not turn the White House into a hotel for political donors. That's Bill and Hillary Clinton's business.
Right. And we have to mention as well that Biden is guilty of pedophilia as well, which is a major point as well.
That has to be proven. Mm-hmm. Once again, look at there's a preponderance.
He can't keep his hands off of children.
There's a preponderance of
mm-hmm.
allegations and
mm-hmm.
evidence.
Mm-hmm.
But in the same way as I insist on people being fair to Trump, I have to be fair to Biden. I don't have any proof that Biden does anything more than touch and feel every young girl he's ever seen in the White House. Okay.
Except
maybe
videos.
He's unconscious. He's old. Maybe he's unconscious. Maybe he's old. Maybe he's an old grandfatherly character. But he only does it to young girls. And it's unsavory. But we don't have proof that he's a pedophile. So the reason why people will listen to what we're saying today is that we're not saying anything that we don't know for a fact. Because if we have a factual evidence that Joseph Biden is a pedophile and is committing a crime, then that evidence demands to be in a court of law, not here on a television show, right? It demands to be presented, argued, and a case made and a prosecution enacted, right? I've heard far worse than what you've just said now. But unless I use the mechanisms that lucky Americans have to act on these things, I think we have to just stay on what we do know for a fact about Biden. Biden came in here to Serbia as if he was a conquering general. The whole city of Belgrade was closed down. Mm-hmm. No one could go out of their house to buy a newspaper when Biden came through town. That's what a conqueror does. And he conquered Serbia for his Albanian financiers in America. We know he's been financed by them. That's public record. We know how much money. He's gone to their fundraising meetings, and he's giving the most vitriolic, un-American, biased, ethnically based speeches that any American politician has ever given.
Scathing lies.
Okay, I mean, America has some very good positive qualities to be shared around the world, and one of them is multi-ethnicity, that people of all different colors and religions and backgrounds can live together, presumably in peace in one country. But when Biden goes into a unilingual, a uni-ethnic Albanian meeting and talks about the need to bomb the Serbs and talks about the need to put Serbs in concentration camps, then he's not behaving in the manner of an American. He's behaving in the manner of a paid client politician paid by a lobby. And Biden probably never expected the videos that have come out of his speeches to his Albanian paymasters. He never expected those to get to the mainstream, and they have never been in the mainstream media. Those videos do not appear on
People need to research
NBC,
that.
ABC, CNN. Those don't appear there. So maybe the average American doesn't know about that, but we over here know about it. And I'm sure people in China know what Biden was saying to his son involved with China business. We know these things are released in the local markets. But once again, you asked me earlier when we started this interview, you asked me what my political leanings are. Okay, so I guess you could describe me as I know this word's a swear word in America. You could describe me as a kind of a socialist. In Canada, we don't pay anything to go to the hospital.
Yeah.
Nothing. Ever. My mother needed open heart surgery. She paid, I think, $10 for the registration form. We don't pay anything to go to school. There may be a few very, very exceptional private schools. But basically everybody in Canada goes to school for free.
And they're excellent schools.
Right. And we go to school for free. And we go to school in 2 languages, not in 1. And in some better...
I love Canada system. I love Canada system.
We go to school in 3 languages.
Yeah.
That's not a money-making venture. It has nothing to do with making money. It has something to do with living together with other people and being able to communicate with them. I went to McGill University in Montreal, which is considered an Ivy League school. It interacts with all of the Eastern Seaboard top schools. And why those poor suckers down there in America were paying $60,000 a year to go to school, I paid $700.
Yeah.
Not $700,000, $700. I'm sending my 2 sons, if they can make it into McGill, to go to McGill now. Now, McGill is in Montreal. It's a 1-hour flight out of New York. It's a few-hour bus ride to New York. And I spent a lot of time going back and forth. And I met a lot of people in New York who were going to school down there who were paying 40 times more than I did for university. And I was getting educated in multiple languages with professors from all over the world. And then I would debate, because I was a debater. I was an international debater. I would debate my debating colleagues from Harvard, from Columbia, and from wherever else, and beat them. Not by a close margin either. And I used to say to them, I said, after I would win the debate, I would ask them, what is it that you're getting down there for the 30 or 40,000 that I haven't been able to figure out in this debate? So there's a lot of good things about the evil socialism that we enjoy up in Canada. We even one time had our own gas company called Petro-Canada, taking our own gas out of our own land with our own workers, with our own company. And Petro-Canada still has some stations around Canada, but the Conservatives closed it down mainly, fortunately. But we used to be able to get gas at what it cost to get the gas out of the ground. We didn't have to go over to Saudi Arabia, have a war there, put our guy in, then have guerrilla warfare for the next 15 years in Iraq, and lynch Saddam, literally cowboy western lynching. Go to another country, lynch the guy. So I think that it's important to take note of the fact that I'm a hardcore, in the American scenario, I'm a hardcore leftist.
And I'm a hardcore conservative.
Yeah, but you understand, I'm farther left than Black Lives Matter, by far.
And I'm far right.
I've stopped police on the street in Montreal from, with no grounds, going up to a black man on the street and say, let's see some ID. I've done that maybe 10 times. I only went to school in Montreal for 2 years. 10 times. The minute I saw a white police officer go up to a black man in Montreal and obviously confront him and said, stop him on the street and ask him for some ID, I would immediately go over and ask the black guy, hey bro, would you like to go for coffee with me at McDonald's? And the black guy, who would not know his rights, of course, because he also lives in a lower class status in Canada, like he does most blacks in America, he would be afraid to talk to me.
Yeah.
But I knew the law. I studied the law. I was a master's student, and I had done political science. And I would say to the black guy, it's all right. You're not under arrest, right? And then I turned to the police officer. Is he under arrest? And if he's under arrest, what charge? Right now. No questioning. No doing anything. He doesn't have to present any ID. There's no law in this country that requires anybody to ever present ID to a police officer. Same in America. Very few Americans know that. No police officer can ever ask you for ID unless you're operating a motor vehicle, because you have to prove you've got a driver's license. And then he gets your ID. But if you're walking on the road and you're stopped in Canada or America by a police officer and they say, let's see some ID, boy, your answer is, sorry, sir, I don't have any and I don't have to give you any. I'm not under arrest unless I am under arrest. What am I under arrest for? What's the charge? So first, officer, we just have one question between us. Am I under arrest? Yes or no? I'm under arrest? Great. What's the charge? As soon as you tell me the charge, I'm not speaking any further. I need to talk to my lawyer. That's the extent of our conversation. There's no, is it a nice day? Where are you going? What's going on? Who are you with? Where were you last night? It's, am I under arrest? What's the charge? Get me to my lawyer. That's our discussion, sir, as much as you want. So I would stop blacks on the street from being harassed by white cops in Canada, multicultural, non-racist, no slavery Canada. So it's not just an American problem. And it's certainly not Trump's fault that white police officers in Canada in 1987, when Trump was still just building buildings, were harassing black guys. Right? So if it's not Trump's fault that white French police officers in Canada were harassing black guys in 1987 on the street, is it perhaps possible that it's not Trump's fault that white police officers in America who were trained and went to school and served on the force through multiple Republican and Democratic Party regimes or governments started having problems now while Trump is in the presidency? Is it his fault? Of course it's not his fault. It's a system he inherited, a racist system. Fix it, Americans. It's not Trump's fault. And by blaming it on Trump, you know what, you leftists, so-called leftists, because not one of you leftists in America has a clue what left means. Because you pay for school. You pay for hospitals, bro. You're not a leftist. You're just another version of a conservative. Your far left of your Democratic Party is a right-wing conservative in Canada. We don't pay to go to the hospital. It's our country. We built the hospitals with our tax money. We hire the doctors. They treat us. Why would I pay them when I already trained them, schooled them, built the hospital, bought the equipment, put it there, and gave them a job to treat me? Why would I pay them any? I mean, I'll give them a tip. I'm certainly not paying them since I hired them.
So long story short, and socialist and conservative, we're both for Trump.
I really enjoy it. I'm enjoying.
Listen,
I'm enjoying.
A Canadian socialist is a hardcore Trump supporter.
And a Canadian conservative, likewise.
Why?
Great.
Because Trump tells the truth as he sees it, and he explodes the myths. Trump's got a chance to win this.
Big chance.
All right,
If
I
the
would like
American
to.
people take a good look at themselves in the mirror and realize that everything that Trump is being blamed for
All
is an
right.
attempt to take the blame off yourself.
All right. I want to thank you for this beautiful exchange, conversation. I would like to wish you a happy trip, that you are successful in what you're intending to do. I'm going to play for the end, I guess, this American anthem. Hopefully, that's going to go back with where that ideal of democratic, country is supposed to be, because very much swayed off the road, that nobody liked to see. But I guess, we pay tribute, to Trump. I wish I was paid for this. I wish you guys paid for that. Obviously, we put some
I
effort.
do this without pay. I'm happy to do this without pay. Everybody
I'm
will
joking.
benefit
Absolutely.
by letting Donald
Absolutely.
Trump serve one term as president fairly. He got the first term ripped off. Let's let the man have one term, put people back to work, stop the wars, and change the direction this planet's been going in for more than 50 years. And what direction is that? The wrong one.
Okay, Angelina, your last words.
Yes, because it's huge problems for not just all Americans, but even the world if Joe Biden gets in. Serious
Okay.
problems. But I guess that's for the next time, what all will happen then. We have a lot to say on that one.
Thank you very much and best wishes.